Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Let's just get right into some more paranormal encounter stories from Reddit. Lunsters asks, in honor of spooky season, what is your true ghost experience? And a name I can't pronounce says, my mother-in-law had 7 grandsons. She did a lot of craft needlework and made a lovely embroidered panel for each one of her grandsons of his name. My youngest son, Stevie, was the 7th grandson, and he was only 2 months old when she suddenly passed of a heart attack. We had never received a name panel from her for Stevie, and I never discussed it with her. I simply assumed that she hadn't gotten around to doing one before she passed. Well, on the night of the day she died, I dreamed of her. She was standing in a place that was very dark, and she didn't speak to me, but was holding a name panel she had made in one hand, and kept gesturing toward it with the other hand, as if to say, "Look at this!" I asked her, "Mom, what are you trying to tell me?" But she shook her head and kept her mouth closed, as if she were not permitted to speak to me, and just repeatedly kept gesturing to the name panel. A few days later, as I was beginning the process of cleaning out her home, I discovered a bag in the top of her bedroom closet. Inside the bag was a name panel that she had embroidered with Stevie's name. This was the same panel she had been showing me in the dream. It was in the bag because she hadn't gotten around to giving it to us yet. Ah, that's a great story. It's nice to see that their mom was able to still give them that final gift after she was already gone. Emmeline TX says, I met a ghost under the Golden Gate Bridge. A date and I went to the North Tower to watch the sunset. You can walk down an incline, and there are huge granite blocks left over from the bridge construction. You can watch the fog roll in and hear the foghorn's long, low notes. We were there until it got dark, and then started walking back up to the car. I looked up, and there was a man sitting on top of one of the blocks. I said hello, and he nodded. He was wearing a plaid shirt, suspenders, wool pants, and old work boots. He was smoking a scruffy old pipe, and I could see the smoke curling up from it. We talked for a minute, and I noticed that we were the last car left in the parking lot. I asked him if someone was picking him up, and he said, I've been waiting a fair while. My wife and daughter will be here eventually, and we can go home together. I asked him if he wanted a ride to just the south end of the bridge, and he smiled and said that he knew that they'd be walking to meet him and they would finish the trip together. I can't think of a worse place to walk. The Golden Gate Bridge is long and it's freezing cold. It's a long, long drop to the water below. But he sounded firm, so I said, have a good night then. About that time, I noticed that my date hadn't said a word. I looked over and he's frozen. He then grabbed my elbow and pushed me to the car. He hurt my arm, he pushed so hard. We got into the car and he was really speeding. We crossed the toll plaza and he started yelling, Who the hell are you talking to? Are you nuts? What the F? He was really panicking because he'd felt that something was very, very wrong. He hadn't seen the man. He saw me having a conversation with thin air. But he said the temperature dropped so much that he was shaking. He also said the air was electric, and he thought that if we didn't get out of there, we might be two of those people who just disappear and are never found. He saw a swirl in the air and smelled tobacco smoke on the breeze. I finally figured it out, at least in my mind. This was in the 1980s. The Golden Gate Bridge was completed in 1937, and quite a few men building it died. He probably was one of them, and he was waiting for when his wife and his daughter died, and they would meet him and then go on wherever the afterlife took them. I hope it was someplace beautiful. I never spoke to my date again. He called me Ghost Girl. I can't blame him. Oh, that one hit me in the feels. It gave me chills, too. I guess I'd have been just as scared as that guy that you were on the date with if I was in his place. But unlike him, I think it's pretty cool that you were able to see that ghost man. It does sound like what OP said, though, that the man was waiting for his wife and daughter to meet him in the afterlife and they can go home together. And I hope they'll all be reunited one day. Rare Term 389 says, The other day I was at my friend's house and she asked me, Do you remember what you saw the last time you were here? Randomly. And I had honestly totally forgotten. A few months ago, she was having another dinner party for all of her girlfriends. It was very lovely. She lives in an old row house with, I believe, 2 or 3 stories. If I had to guess, it's probably about 100 years old. At the entrance of her home, there's this long wooden staircase parallel to the dining table. The view of the staircase is partially obstructed by a wall right after the first landing of the staircase. So I'm sitting at the dining table eating, and I see off to the corner of my eye, but very distinctly, a long skirt trailing up the stairs to the landing, with a clear foot peeking out at the bottom of the skirt, some sort of old-timey ballet flat. But there obviously was nobody there. Nobody in the party was wearing a long skirt, and we would have seen her walk between the dining table and the stairs, and although it was vivid, it was clearly ghostly. I had honestly totally forgotten about it because it was startling but not scary. I actually felt calm. So when my friend asked me the other day what I saw, she was very perturbed because two of her roommates on separate occasions had since told her that they felt something in the house. One of her roommates was convinced it was a female presence. The most vivid ghostly encounter I've ever had. Wow, OP, I'm curious about the history of that house. I wonder if your friend could do some research and maybe find out who some of the past tenants were, see if any of them match your description. Although it might be a little hard since all you saw was her foot under the bottom of her dress, but anyway, it's still more parts of a ghost than I've ever seen. Dalissa says, my dad died of pancreatic cancer a few years ago, and about a year before this happened, I was coming out of the bathroom of my mom's house, where I grew up, and also where he died. Saw a figure walking towards me around the corner and into my parents' bedroom. Happened fast. I was baffled, assumed it had to have been my husband and my mind playing tricks on me, as both my father and my husband are about the same size. I stuck my head into my parents' dark bedroom and said, "Honey?" He answered back, "Yeah?" from the living room. Whoa, that's creepy. I would have ran away from that dark bedroom so fast if I was OP. Nope. Your Nan's Bricky says, I always used to see shadows for a split second, the kind everyone gets, where you see something in the corner of your vision, but you turn and it's gone. It only really ever happened in my dad's house, in just certain rooms, but I never thought much of it. Put it down to either smoking the devil's lettuce or just being tired. The bit that was odd at first was that naturally in my head, I knew that it was a girl. There was no indication whatsoever of it being a girl, but it was just instinct to call it a she or a her. Anyway, I noticed around my birthday that it would become noticeably more frequent, happening every day, multiple times, and up to this point, I'd never mentioned it to anybody because it had never bothered me, and again, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me. I eventually mentioned it to my dad one day and said something along the lines of, "Do you ever see the shadow in the corner of your eye, but you turn and it's gone?" To which he just replied, "Yes," and then I said, "I always see her run through the middle of the room towards the kitchen." And he went completely pale and said, "What do you mean, her?" And this was when I realized that I had no idea that it was a girl, and I had no idea why I'd ever thought that. My dad was visibly uncomfortable at this point, which is odd for him, as he doesn't really believe in this sort of stuff. I asked him what was wrong, and he told me that during my birth there were complications, and I was meant to have a twin sister, but she died hours after being born. He told me that as a toddler, I would run around the house constantly as if I was looking for someone. And as I learned to talk, they would ask what I was looking for, to which I would reply, "Isabel." I don't remember any of that, but they said I eventually grew out of it. I do definitely remember always a consistent feeling that someone should be here who isn't here. I get that sounds weird, but I don't know how else to describe the feeling. It was almost like a watered-down feeling of grief. Up until the day I mentioned it to my dad, I had no idea about any of this, but after he told me, it made me remember a time as a child. I told my mother that I'd wished for a sister, and she broke down crying, but wouldn't tell me why she was so upset. It stuck in my head and never made any sense until then. Well, I've definitely heard lots of cool stories about twin bonds, and this is another one. It's really sad that your sister didn't make it, but at least she's still always with you. I wonder if OP kept seeing her, or if they grew out of it, like most people do when they get older. Maybe the twin bond overpowers that? Interesting. The next post is from Live Classroom 4811. I rarely talk about this because it was so long ago, and most people will just look at you like a loon, but it happened, so here it is. Lived in a house right after my parents got divorced, with my mom, that was older, but not super old. It was one of those main level houses that had an upstairs apartment, which is where I lived. When we first moved in, I was always hear someone walking up the stairs that led directly to my bedroom door late at night. I always assumed it was my mom coming to check and make sure my TV was off, blah blah blah. This went on for a few months until I, an angsty teen, decided to ask my mom why she felt the need to walk up every night and make sure I was asleep, and that it was in fact just waking me up. My mother is a Southern belle through and through and has no reason to lie, especially about parenting, and told me she had never once done that. Mainly because she could see from the bottom of the stairs through the crack in the door if my TV was on or not. This was WTF number one. Pretty much immediately after that, I was home alone on Saturday, sitting in the living room on the first floor. I heard a sound from upstairs that I can only describe as Lucifer himself clawing through the rafters. I immediately ran upstairs and saw that anything that was on the counter was now on my floor, almost all at once. From the CD player in my bedroom to the soaps in my shower, everything was on the ground. I was freaked the F out, so I called my dad to pick me up and told him all about it when he did. Had to speak to the divorce counselor about this one, so I knew no one was taking me seriously. Finally, as an avid Ghost Adventures fan, I took it upon myself to communicate with this thing. So one night I waited until the witching hour and then set up the Ghost Radar app on my iPod Touch and got to work. I was standing in the bathroom and simply said, "If you are here, make yourself known." Immediately, my toothbrush flew off the counter so fast it hit the wall behind me. I've never been able to explain this, but even typing this, I have chills going through my body. The house was a year-to-year rental, so we moved out a few weeks after this, and I didn't think about it much until a few years ago, when me and my sister started talking about how creepy that house was around my mom. She went on to explain to us that she fully agreed and would deter it when we were kids to qualm our fears. She gave us full details of times she would wake up with a figure standing at the foot of her bed and her being paralyzed with fear. She even had an encounter where she was in her bathroom, watched her bedroom door open and shut, and a shadow stand in the corner until she closed her eyes. Okay, well, the WTF number one was creepy enough, hearing someone walk up the stairs to your room every night and then finding out it wasn't actually your mom. But then when everything on your room got thrown on the floor and the toothbrush incident happened, that was also really scary. The most scary thing, though, was probably when your mom corroborated everything and then told her stories about how she was getting paralyzed by some ghost at the foot of her bed. I'm so glad you guys moved. Exact Drummer 7336 says, "Live in an old triple-decker down the street from a military fort on the coast. One night I woke up and saw a full-body apparition at the end of my bed. It didn't move, just stood leaning on the end of the bed. I just sat there staring back, and after some time it went away, and I convinced myself that it was just a bad dream." The next day, I had a friend over. We were in my living room having a beer. I told him the story, and he thought I was crazy. I did my best to convince him, and in jest, he started to taunt whatever it was in the house, saying things like, "If you're there, give us a sign," in a mocking tone. His beer was a few feet away on a coffee table. Suddenly, it started foaming over the top, like when someone hits the top of the bottle hard, and he got white and quiet and then left. I slept in the living room for the final 5 months of my lease. So it's pretty funny how your friend learned their lesson about taunting ghosts. And user Fart on My Popsicle says, when I was 9 or so, I went through a phase where I was afraid of the dark and paranoid about ghosts after having watched The Sixth Sense. Weren't we all? Anyway, we had just moved into a newer, larger house. Even though it wasn't an old home, it creeped me out. I would ask my stepmom to leave my bedroom door open and the hallway light on until I fell asleep, and there was a small room in the basement that was inexplicably always freezing cold. One day I got home from school before my dad or stepmom were home from work, and my older brother was in his room in the basement. I had to pee, and because I was a paranoid little turd, I opted to pee with the basement door wide open, thanks to the closet scene in The Sixth Sense. When you walked into the bathroom, there was a vanity with a mirror, and to the right was the toilet. The door was probably about 8 feet from the toilet. So I'm peeing when in the corner of my eye, I suddenly notice the bathroom door slowly closing. I look at it, and there's a woman in a white dress and an outdated hairstyle standing there, slowly pushing it closed. Think Elizabeth Bathory style hair and dress, but black hair and a white dress. I panicked and ran to catch the door. looked up to where she had been and shouted, "Don't!" But she was gone. No fadeaway, no puff of smoke, no movement. She was there and then she wasn't. I still get the chills when I think about it, and I'm in my 30s now. Edit. I forgot to mention, she didn't feel particularly threatening. Maybe sensed my fear and was kind of pranking me. Still scared the hell out of me, though. And Goddess Alithia commented on that. Maybe she just felt the door should be closed when you pee. LOL. A modest lady. And I like that last commenter's take on it, because maybe she was just trying to teach you some manners. But I can definitely relate to the being scared of The Sixth Sense, though. That movie was so creepy, and I could see how it would make you not want to go into small rooms for a long time. Or have blanket forts, or go to school. Yeah, super creepy. And that's it for today. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Please hit like and subscribe if you did. And if you've had any creepy paranormal encounters you'd like to share, please share them in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. Until next time, stay safe out there and don't turn off the lights.